Now it's time to take a look how this is blending into the background. Like any other particle system, starts from zero, it doesn't pre-warm. So to take care of that, I'm just going to drag my particle system to the right. And the totality of this animation, let's say, lasts for 10 seconds. So I'll go to 10 seconds. Better way to get there would be if I control click into that space, I could switch it to frames. 10 seconds is 300 frames. By going 300 frames, out here in the timeline, I'll press the N key to trim my workspace. So now I can have this repeating loop and staring at the flame as soon as it loads into RAM. So as it loads into RAM, we have to take in consideration maybe this will glow a little bit based upon the moving of this. Maybe we want to create a little more radial light going around here. And all that's going to be accomplished by just repeating the candle and doing different blend layers and maybe flipping it as needed. So here's the loop. All right, I'm going to pre-comp this layer because I think it's fine the way it is. We always could go back and adjust the light of the candle. Now I'm just going to call it candle flame. And I'm going to undo that. Why? Because when I was pre-comping it, leave all attributes in the room. No, I want this to be self-contained where all these attributes here are put within that comp. So this way when I duplicate it, I'm not doubling up on the effects, such as here. Control D. That did make the flame more intense, and maybe that is something we want to do. But compared to the rest of the scene, maybe it's too intense. All right, so I'm going to use this layer and making sure these are clicked. I'm just going to maybe rotate it and flip it over. I could have just done a flip. I'm going to just rotate it like this. And a flip would have been a negative scale. So rotating is one, and then the V key, move it up into position here, and maybe use this scaled up. Another way to do this flipping, instead of rotating it like I just did, I'll hit undo twice. If you go into scale, pressing the S key, and you uncheck that join linked scale for uniform scale. If I want to flip it over the y-axis in a negative direction, that also gives it to me. The advantage of this is before I had to drag the other composition off to one side here, the composition's in the same place, being these borders. So I don't have to worry about something just being dragged off here, and it'll line up perfectly. So less errors involved in just flipping it using the negative y-axis in this case. Right, so there's a mirror. So what if I start to play with my different blend modes, or maybe instead of overlay, a soft light, and I could go through these to see which ones might give me that glowing that I'm looking for, and then I can add a mask to it. Right. So next, after I flipped it, I want to scale it again, but I did scale in negative direction. What if I lock these two together? As I scale, you can see it is scaling based upon the negative and the positive axis over there. So after you scale something in negative direction, feel free to go back and lock together the proportions. So here I'm just trying to get a little more stretch out of it. Then all I want from this is to go under transparency now. Maybe just pull it down. And probably less than that even. Make it very subtle. probably scale it even closer. So it's very much towards the top of the candle. I probably even want it a little closer and a little more brighter. And then at this point, I might create a feather, a mask, and feather it a little bit. So this way, this doesn't leak up here. And feather this, the path tool, right there. And then we could just cut a path around the candle, like this. Closing it again. So now that effect is only applied within there. And then all paths come with feathers. So let me open up the mask. And we could do a little feathering on it to make it softer. I'll zoom out. So this is what we created, that extra light reflecting and acting a little bit like translucence on top of the wax. So I named these a little more appropriate. Top candle and flame, because that made a little more sense. The top of the candle is this area, and the flame is of course the flame. Now I'm going to duplicate the flame. Control D or Command D. I'm going to drag that duplicate beneath it. And in this, I'm going to scale it up, fade it back to the background, probably add a tint to it, and of course a fastbox blur to blur it out so it just doesn't feel like this flame is separate from everything else. And that's our goal, is try to combine this flame to reach into this environment of this 2D image a little more. So I could call this Flame 2, which I think is a good name. Since this isn't going deep, I could call it Flame Environment. And I'm going to scale it up. If I leave the anchor point right here for this layer, the pivot point, when I scale, it's going to scale around this point and my flame will go off screen. So picking up the pivot point tool and dragging it to the bottom of the flame where I want the transformation to happen saves a little time. Picking up the move tool again, hitting the S key for scale, scaling it up a lot bigger. Dragging it here, applying a fastbox blur to it, increasing the blurriness. If you like color around it, maybe that's fine. The mood, though, I think is more subtle than that. So I'm going to try tint on it to take away some of that color. Now it's time to fade it. So transparency fades to the background. That little flicker is what I was looking for. So you can experiment on your own to see how you can use this technique to just add a little more environment to start blending this effect into the background. So next I'm going to create a wick, and then I'll duplicate flickering in the background. So to create a wick, I'm going to make sure I have nothing selected. Going under our drawing tools, and I guess a rounded rectangle would do. Nothing too intense, just a normal tiny wick like that. Let me zoom in, and I'm going to take that shape and I'm going to drag it beneath the flame and then colorize it. Probably just black is good enough. We'll see. So no stroke, so I'll click the stroke word and I'll select no stroke. And for fill, maybe green would be good. I'll start with a solid color. And maybe we have to blend the transparency in down here, make a little alpha. We'll pick up the color red so it looks a little more faded like everything else. So with the shape, I'll go back to fill. Maybe I'll select the linear gradient. Click OK. And here we can adjust the angle of the gradient. And if I click on the color swatch itself, you can see the different places this color stock goes. I'm thinking it's a very simple gradient. Right. So I'm just seeing which way it points. So on both ends I'm going to make it black. Then maybe I'll pick up this red from here a little bit. And for its alpha, pulling this back down this way. I'll click the alpha stop, and for alpha, maybe I'll slide it down a little bit. Click OK. Let's see what we got in the scene. Maybe that wick has to be a little bit thicker, or the flame has to come down a little bit on top of it. More like that. Delete that. If you think the flame's a little too big, we could shrink this layer. And again, I'll just take this pivot point and I'll just move it towards here. And then for the scale, we could just make it tinier, like that. Depends how you want your candle to look. So I'm going to take this flicker. I'm also going to migrate it elsewhere in the scene. So I'm going to take this flame environment, hit Control D to duplicate it, and just drag it here, see if it adds anything else to the scene. Let me rotate it upside down. So instead of rotating upside down, I think it's easier for me again to take this scale, uncheck uniform scale, go negative for it to flip it, and I'll recheck the uniform scale. For a moment, I'll increase the transparency so it's easier to see where it is on screen. Maybe like here. Maybe I'll rotate it a little bit too, grabbing a corner. It's a lot easier to pick a rotation from here sometimes, but it's also good just to work in the viewport as an artist. I'll pick up the V key, which is the move tool, and I'll just move it around here. And we could apply either a scale or maybe another mesh distortion to this if we really want it to move across the scene, this flicker. But I'm going to set the opacity back to 22. Maybe that's too intense for this darkness here. I could play with the different blend modes, but I'm thinking maybe 10. To add a nice soft flicker down here and up here. Now if we want these to be not so in sync, this flicker, like for number 2, that's easy. We just drag the layer to offset it a little bit, to add some variety to it. Maybe even up here, this other flicker could go down to 10% now that I'm looking at it. Or maybe. And then this flicker, I'll just increase its fastbox blur so it's even more soft. Let me zoom in. And after this loads into memory a little bit, I'll just play a moment of it. We just get a little lighting happening over here.